what it is. I'm just going to have to hold it. Growing up, I absolutely hated math. Math was never my thing. I excelled at reading and writing, but when it came to fractions and numbers, you might as well do it on your own because my answer is probably not going to be accurate. People often ask, what's your favorite subject in school? And anything that was math related was always at the bottom of the list. Now over time, my appreciation for math has gotten better, but not by much. In college, I got through with the bare minimum to get my degree. But Jessica, being the smart and astute person that she was, she went on for more. And so she's been given the wonderful task of balancing our checkbook, paying our bills, and giving me my weekly allowance. As much as I don't care for numbers, I can't help but think of them when I think about this story. 5,000 people, 5 loaves of bread, and 2 fish. I'm no Einstein, but I'm not sure how you make that work. Either my math is off, or something incredible had to have happened. Because how you make that work is beyond me. It defies all logic. When we consider the logic of this story, it's very, very easy to explain it away. In fact, most people do explain it away. Some people have shared their belief that what actually happened during that time was that some of those people had food that they were carrying with them. And when it came time to eat, they shared it with other people around them. It's the perspective that some people take. Other people take the perspective that Jesus was talking about and dealing with matters of a spiritual fullness and not a physical fullness. And what they're saying makes sense. It really does. When you think of a miracle of this nature, it seems so implausible with 5,000 people. But with that 5,000 in mind, let's take it to another level. Instead of 5,000 people, some people, including myself, believe that it was more like 20,000 people. If you read on to verse 21, it reads, and those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So what at first seemed really unbelievable, really seems incredible now. And as much as I hate to say it, math can apply. It has to do with something called return on investment. Now, if you knew how bad I was at math, you would understand how silly it is for me to be the one explaining this to you, but I'm going to explain it to you anyway. Let's say you have $100,000 to invest, okay? And that's called your capital, and you invest it, and at the end of the year, you have $110,000. That extra money there is your rate of investment. That's your rate of return. Greg, is that correct? Okay. In today's world, investing $100,000 and getting a $10,000 return at the end of the year is a pretty good rate of return. To calculate the rate of investment, this is what you would need. You would have the return minus the capital, divided by the capital, times 100%. Yeah, Lois, I understand your pain there. You lost me right from the beginning. So following this logic, let's follow this logic a little bit further. In other words, the more capital you have, the chances are the better rate of return you're going to get. In other words, the larger funds you have to start out with, the better the chances are of having a good return. But it's funny here because while the disciples were following Jesus, looking for him to give them ideas and answers to deal with their situation of a shortage of food, Jesus turns it back on them. He turns it back on them to help. In 14:16, Jesus says to the disciples, you give them something to eat. And what do they have to work with? What do they have to work with? 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, which would come to about 5 servings total. 5 servings total. So here's more math. The total would yield about 650 calories per serving. 55 grams of fat, 130 grams of carbs, and 35 grams of protein. Feeding 20,000 people on that? I don't even know how you calculate that, but it seems pretty incredible. It seems implausible. It seems inconceivable. You know what? Fact of the matter is, it seems impossible. Impossible. Chances are we'd be like the disciples. We'd be looking at this fish and this bread, and we're looking at this and gosh, and we need more. We need more. And while the disciples are looking at Jesus, and you can't blame them for probably being a little sheepish about the whole thing, Jesus is looking back at them and he's saying, go for it. He's giving them a thumbs up and saying, you feed them. Feed them. He's confident. He's assured. He's certain. You can imagine their worry because many of us doubt. It's been my experience that faith that comes pouring out of people is not a natural state that we find in people. It's been my experience that people need lots of encouragement. People need lots of prodding and poking. They need to trust in God. And rather than leave it up to God to bless our efforts, what they simply do is back out completely. One author, and I didn't come up with these, but I thought it was interesting. One author actually threw out a list of excuses people use when Jesus charges us with the command to help. I didn't come up with these, but I can tell you I've heard these more than once. See if you can see yourself in any of these excuses. I have nothing. I'm too old for this type of thing. I hear children. I'm too busy. I've already given my bid, and I'm going. We should let the young people do it. I'm not ordained. I got news for you. I'm not ordained yet either. I don't know too much about the Bible. That's not my gift. I've got too much on my plate right now. How many of you have heard that or used that yourself? Is there a Tennessee show of hands? Yeah. If any of you have these excuses, I really want you to apply them to the growing church model, or even what I call the new church model. When you look at new and growing churches, it's interesting to see them kind of blossom and grow. If you look at churches that start out, the growth that they have, the things that they're gifted with, the direction that they're going. It's not because they start out with huge sums of money, tons of capital to begin with. And chances are, a new church doesn't have a tremendous amount of people to start out with. Chances are, it's those people doing what they can and giving what they can, and it's Jesus blessing their investment. It's Jesus blessing their best efforts. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be spot on. It doesn't have to be immaculate. God works with it. God works with it. I look around this church and I think of people in this church, and I've heard people say, that's not my gift. I wouldn't be asking you. I wouldn't be talking to you with that matter. Are you passionate about this church growing? Are you passionate about this church being here 50 years from now? God will bless your investment. I'm not talking finances. This is the most giving church I've ever seen. But when it comes to your efforts, when it comes to everybody contributing to the future of this church, this is what I'm talking about here. This is what I'm talking about. I've asked people to be on committees, and they're so uncertain. And I think they're going to find that God will bless their best efforts. That's all God can ask. Let everybody take this message how they're going to take it. But as to me, when I read about this and I think about Jesus and this return on investment formula that comes from the scripture passage, it speaks volumes to the power of God. You know, many times it seems like we have a solution, but it doesn't seem like much. We have a situation, but we don't have the perfect answer. But there are reasons why churches grow. There are reasons why churches take off. And the return on investment model that we were talking about, that's where God blesses exponentially our best efforts. And the results that we are given, the results that you see in growing churches, the results that you see in your life, they defy all logic. They defy all expectation. Like many of us, the disciples, they didn't know they had anything to offer to that situation. It doesn't help that they could only come up with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and looking at that basket, you could blame them. Back then it wasn't much, and today, even in today's society, with 1,000-calorie meals, 1,000-calorie meals, it's not much today either. You know, I went over to McDonald's, and, you know, Jessica's gone, so Ronald McDonald's been doing a fair bit of cooking this week. And as I looked up at the board and I made an order, they've actually put the calories right next to it. And that morning, I had over 900 calories. 800. But it tasted so good. But you know what? How much do you really need? Do you need a bunch of calories? Do you need a bunch of money? Do you need a bunch of people? That bread and that fish doesn't seem like much. I think of the story and I read the various explanations that modern Bible scholars they use, and the way they rationalize it, and the way that they explain it. And I think their explanation and all of our doubts and all of our questions we have when we read something like this have more to do with what we think Jesus is possible of doing than it should. After all, Jesus is capable of doing a great deal more than we can imagine. And that goes for our contributions to committees, it goes to our efforts and various activities that we don't have much energy for, school teachers, missions workers, what we offer our community. For those who have felt this way, I hear you. There's some days when getting out of bed seems like all I can handle. I've been there. Running at 50% capacity, 40%, 30%. I was speaking with a person today, and they got back from their high school reunion. This person may be running at 30% capacity, but she's here. And she's giving her best. One day as I was talking to a guy, I was talking about the scripture, and I was building up this thing of asking him to be in a particular committee. He says, "No, you're not going to get me talked into it. You can't squeeze blood from the turnip. 0% of 50% is still 0. I don't think that any of us here are at that 0%, are you? You're here in body. You're here in body, so that counts for at least 1/2 of 1%. Don't you see? Reading this, it's not a matter of what we're lacking. It's what we do that matters more. What we bring to the church, no matter how big or how small. Even on those off days or weeks, God will work with it. God is a generous God and an abundant God. And throughout time, God has shown that He is capable of producing much out of little. It's not some scripture to justify giving anything less than our best, but sometimes the best we can give after a rough day, a rough week, rough month, rough year, is all we have. I hate to put math in the Bible because that's no fun. But the fact of the matter is that there are some pretty unreal stories and some pretty incredible numbers in here. Pretty incredible and pretty unbelievable numbers in here. The fact is that many times the numbers don't seem to add up, and I'm right there with you. The fact is, we'll always have times where these stories, we read these stories and we look at the numbers and we question and we doubt. Maybe then, rather than overanalyzing and coming up with hundreds of different explanations and arguing with one another, maybe the perspective that's most helpful here is that Jesus asks us to do what we can. To bring what we can bring. That He works with what we bring, no matter how big or how small. And He blesses it exponentially. For all of you math nuts out there, there's no good equation for that one.